Hey everybody, this is DM Galabond, and I am making a quick recording here for the benefit of some new players in my History of D&D game. Just going to go over for them a little bit of orientation about where we are in the game world and what is going on. They've heard me talk a little bit about the fact that we're in an imperial setting, and the empire is called the Sylvan Empire. They also know that this empire is an empire in decline, that it has seen better, more prosperous times, and in the past. The area where they are is an island, and the landmass itself is called Oshator, an elven name for the island. And this island is a province within the kingdom, and there are several cities, villages, towns, a lot of places on them that exist but aren't large enough to be put on any map. And that actually includes our starting city, but I am showing it just as a bit of reference. So the entire island is now quasi-autonomous kingdom on the far-flung edge of a declining empire. Once it was part of a province that encompassed the entire peninsula that sits some miles to the east of this island and juts about 500 miles into the sea where Oshator is located. It's not fully an inland sea, but it is a sea that's mostly cut off from the larger ocean, just a narrow channel at the west end that lets out into the larger ocean. So now there's only a couple of islands, and just the very southern portion of that peninsula are in the territory of the empire. Disease and corruption from within the empire, as well as encroachment by monstrous humanoids and other terrors from outside the empire, have shrunken the northern, western verges, and the same has happened on the south and the east. So, if you think about it, it is an empire that had expanded out from its origin points, had reached its widest sphere of influence maybe some 250 years ago, held stable for a while, and then about 50 years later, it gradually started to decline and now they're not able to hold and maintain as much territory. So the borders generally pull back. Every few years or so, if you look at an updated map, it'll show that the borders are a little bit closer in towards the heart of the empire. I want to go over a few landmarks today and show people where we are, and as we have new players that are beginning to think about creating their own custom characters, some ideas. If you want your character to be from this area, these are some options for you. Of course, if you want your character to be from some other part of the empire, we can talk about that individually, and I'll be happy to tell you a little bit more about other parts of the empire. So the first thing for everybody to know is Dedale. Dedale is the little village where Siren, the original character, who was part of the original group of players that started this game, he first met the NPCs who are members of the village council in the village of Dedale. And this is right along what is colloquially known as the Queen's Road, this highway that goes up the coast and connects the various major cities here. But Dedale sits about an hour or a full day's ride south of Hosland, a day's ride north of Théoden's Keep, and then another day's ride north of the provincial capital, which is Olenathius. So, Dedale is a village primarily made up of humans, but it's got a few elves and dwarves and a couple of other people in there. Um, Théoden's Keep, Duke Théoden is an elf, so you'll find him in charge of the keep along with his wife. But there's a lot of humans and dwarves and halflings and other people there as well. And then Olenathius um, is the provincial capital, and it is primarily an elf city. And as I go through, I can read a little bit about that. Um, the Yes, Olenathius still retains the all the civic buildings, and they are still in use from uh, the time that this was the seat of a province uh, for the entire empire. But those are now used basically uh, by the king or the queen. Currently, there's a queen in power in this semi-autonomous kingdom. Then there's Arendria. And so let me go show you where Arendria is. Arendria is up here towards the north. It is the largest city, a port city, and it is also an elven city. Then there's Blackpool. Uh, Blackpool, sitting over here a little bit to the east of Arendria, is a human city. And it is one of the smaller cities that warrants a place on most maps in the area. Then also up at the north, there's Kilmarnock. It's also kind of a small city, and this one is actually a dwarven city. This little spit of land out here is mountainous, and there's some mining that's happened there, and so Kilmarnock is a dwarven city that they do both mining and they do fishing. So it's a little bit of both in there. Blackpool, they do a lot of fishing. They also do some shipbuilding there and whatnot. Arendria has one of the large ports. They're importer exporter. They have a large harbor, fairly good sized military that sort of looks over this northern area. Um, Whenever somebody from Kilmarnock or Blackpool or Ravenna needs help with something, they usually send for the military at Arendria instead of going all the way down to the capital. So Ravenna is a halfling city. Um, so you have a little halfling enclave down here. They're very agricultural, lots of dairy, lots of farming. They do some fishing. They're kind of a quiet folk here. Lots of good mead and good wine comes out of Ravenna because they like making their, making cultivating their apiaries for beekeeping, and then growing grapes to vineyards to do wine and all that kind of good stuff. Um, and then over here to the east, on the opposite side, kind of sitting all by itself over here, uh, is Thesponia. And it is one of the smaller cities. It's also the most geographically isolated, and it is filled with the mavericks, renegades, and misfits from the other cities that don't quite fit in anywhere else. Now, Thesponia has a reputation for being kind of a den of pirates and smuggling and all that kind of stuff there. Um, and it's also an increasingly dangerous place to live because as populations have sort of evaporated from the inland rural villages and towns and concentrated more in the cities, well, then that vacuum has been filled in by a more monstrous humanoid. So you have a lot more orcs and goblins and gnolls and all kinds of other nasty stuff running around in the interior here. So Thesponia, they kind of are by themselves a little bit. And um, because they have a reputation of being a bit lawless, not a whole lot of the other cities on the island pay that much attention to them. So um, there's a potential uh, to have some shenanigans and stuff going on over there. So now we'll move a little bit south, and we'll talk about Hofsland. Hofsland is a human city, and it's a the people of Hofsland are very industrious, and they get up to all kinds of things. A lot of adventuring companies out of Hofsland, a lot of caravan companies because they're kind of a waypoint between uh, Arendria and the capital. Um, they're one of the biggest cities on this coastal trade route here. Uh, of course, there's a lot of trade that does go by ship from Arendria and through the different ports, but there's a lot of overland trade that goes through here as well. Um, Hosland also is probably the closest thing that Thesponia has to an allied city on the island. A lot of people who kind of don't fit in anywhere else, um, they'll sort of migrate to Hofsland, and then if the heat gets too much even in Hofsland, well, they'll either head off overland to Thesponia or they'll get a boat and go around to Thesponia. Like I said, Dedale is the village where our story started, and Thaden's Keep is the keep of the Duke. That's about uh, a day's ride south of Dedale. Then Olynthius is the capital. And as we go further south, um, okay, so we talked about this. We talked about this. All right, let's talk about Skalmarnes. Skalmarnes is an elven city, and Skalmarnes is down here on this little island. So it's kind of um, it's sort of a refuge for druids and stuff over here on Skalmarnes, um, or on this little island. Now, druids are in this edition, of course, they are human characters, but elves have very much an affinity for nature, and they created at one time kind of a sanctuary and invited druids to come in and help tend it. And so they've always had a very close relationship with the humans who follow the paths of the druid. So Skalmarnes, you'll find a lot of druids over there. What is the next thing? Okay. Ilrun Serene. Ilrun Serene is a large city. It's down here in the southern coast, and it's a major port on the island. Um, and of course, other than Thesponia, it's the farthest east and the most isolated of the cities. But between Ilran Sarane and Salaskara, they kind of provide the same kind of protection, military, naval protection for this cluster of cities down here in the south, in the way that Arendria does for this cluster of cities up here in the north. And then obviously Olynthius provides more direct protection to Cretenian here and Hofsland, and to the villages and towns and everything around it. But if there's ever any reason that there would be some threat that would threaten multiple areas of the province at one time, then all of these cities would probably send to Olenitheus to, help coordinate any kind of defense for the entire area. Drapana is a dwarven city, and Drapana is down here on the south. Again, you see there's kind of this ridge of mountains that are over in here, so there's a lot of mining, but they're also kind of a coastal city, so they do quite a bit of manufacturing of other types of tools and smithing and stuff like that that they do down here in Drapana. Crotenian is a human city, and Crotenian is this one right here to the south of Olenitheus. Now, you can tell on this map that there's real deep water harbor here, right where Olenitheus is, and that's probably why that became the capital, because it was the easiest place for them to put in with larger ships. You could have rather deep harbor in this area, and that kind of made the natural stopping point as an anchorage for the elves who were first exploring this area thousands of years ago. Crotenian, once again, kind of forestry, agriculture, that type of thing. So there's some mills and furniture manufacturing and all that kind of stuff that happens in Crotenian. Lumber industry is pretty big there. What else do we have? Salascara is, I believe Salascara is, it's a human city, and it's the largest human city that's on the island. So again, just like Arendria has all kinds of, oh no, wait a minute. Did I say that right? Yeah, Arendria is a large elven city. Salascara is the large human city. And so a lot of shipbuilding and other types of things happen down here in Salascara, and it's kind of the hub for a lot of trade on the southern part of the province, whereas Arendria is sort of a hub for trade in the northern part of this island province. And yeah, I think that's it. That's pretty much all we have. So if you are getting to a point where you're thinking about creating your trading in your pre-generated character for a permanent character, then depending on what race you have, those are a few ideas about different places where your character could be from. Now, of course, like I said, you could decide, well, I don't want to be from this island. I want to be from somewhere else completely. And we can talk about the area of the empire overall and take a look at some of the other options that you have there. And also, like I said, I've been very sketchy with the descriptions of the types of industries and everything here, because I want this to really be our game. And as players come along, and if you have some ideas that you'd like to flesh out about the what happens in the city that your character is from, I'd like to give you a little bit of freedom to do that, and not box you in and say, well, DM says it has to be this way. The only thing I will do is I will say, okay, this is, and I'll even tell you this: these are the official names that they appear on Imperial maps. You might say that based on what your traditions are, there's actually another name for the same place, and so you might contribute a different name to the same town or city. And then if you want to be from somewhere that's not on a map, you want to be from a small town or a village or whatnot, well, then we can figure out what the name of that village or town would be and where it would be, and that type of thing. But just keep in mind that the way the world is right now, um, this island has more pockets of civilization that are connected by controlled and patrolled roads or sea lanes, and it's not so much that it's a built up or well maintained area. A lot of the inland areas have gone to complete wilderness. There's probably some ruins of some other cities around that people will eventually come across and find and whatnot. And you know, clearly from this legend down here, the island is maybe 70 miles wide at its widest, and perhaps a couple hundred miles north to south. So it's a pretty small area in the world, and there's lots of different parts of the world for your characters to eventually go and explore. Um, so that's all I wanted to do for today is bring that. I am going to um, paste this into the Discord for the players so that they can review this over the course of a few minutes and get some information about what they might want. All right. Thank you, players, and thank you to anyone who decided to come by and watch the stream during the week. Take care, everybody, and we'll talk to you later. Bye bye.